Hello everyone. Good morning from Cameroon, West Africa. I'm called Eri Stephanie Lama, an environmental and climate justice advocate and also the lead at Voices for Forest Alliance. We're a non-profit organization based in Limbe, Cameroon, and we emerged from the documentary called African Voices for Africa's Forests, produced by the African Climate Reality Project and Rewild Africa. The documentary tells the story of the work we do in rural communities, with women building their capacities on regenerative agriculture, agroecology, and climate-smart farming. We also build their capacities on entrepreneurship activities like the startup of microenterprises, small microenterprises, and climate leadership. We are currently working on a climate leadership academy, which we are seeking partnership and support from whoever finds interest in building rural women's capacities for climate leadership. And our key technology or our key aspect is the use of creative arts, because most of these women did not go to school, they can't read and they can't write. Now, on the case of oil and gas in Cameroon, as far as my knowledge is concerned, we are one of the only organizations in Cameroon who have had a conversation around the oil and gas issues. Why is this so? Because though the oil and gas issue in Cameroon is affecting communities, many don't seem to find a niche or a connection to how it is doing so and how it is actually doing as compared to communities like Uganda in East Africa, who are having visible effects on a daily basis. I work with communities in the Bimbia Bonantikombo Community Forest, and just opposite to the Bimbia Bonantikombo Community Forest is an oil refinery. This oil refinery is Cameroon's leading oil refinery and only oil refinery built in the 1970s. And over the years, this oil refinery has produced or transformed crude oil, extracted crude oil, and has exported this crude oil to companies in Europe and America. And despite the exportation of this crude oil for centuries, for years, Cameroon is still one of the poorest countries in West Africa, because the crude oil, even though it is exported from Cameroon, has not been able to help its communities. Rather, it has caused even more damage, more harm than good. Thanks to Power Shift Africa, who, through the Shifting Power documentary, we collaborated with other African countries to produce with them. We were able to collaborate with people like Fatuma in Senegal, Mike in Nigeria, Irene in Uganda, Mali, and myself in Cameroon, where I was able to tell the story of how the refinery has affected communities in the Bimbia Bonadikombo Community Forest. When we did a small research with the women in these communities, we noticed that around 2010, there was an explosion that occurred from the refinery, which lasted for over a week. All the pollution, the gases that were released in the air for 1 week were transported to the Bimbia Bonadikombo Community Forest, which is just opposite the refinery. And women in these communities testified of skin diseases that affected them over that period. They were restricted from using rainwater because they were told the water had been polluted, which of course it had been polluted. For over 1 week, gases are being released in the atmosphere, and the wind blows them back to these communities. Then communities around the refinery were displaced. They lost their crops, they lost their food because of the gases that were released. Some of the gases directly fell on the houses, and households had to be displaced. And that is just to say why we don't have a perfect rehabilitation scheme. So where could these households have been displaced to? Crops were destroyed for years. Communities here were affected by low crop yield. There was a disease that was released, and some crops like the Igbo cocoyam were not growing anymore, and scientists mentioned it was due to acid rain. So this was a call to hunger, because this particular crop, the Igbo cocoyam, is a delicacy to many communities in Cameroon. And there is a direct connection that the release of these gases could have caused the destruction or the infection that occurred to the production of this particular crop. Communities mentioned of how they were having skin disease, skin rashes, and they were told not to use the rainwater anymore, and it affected them because most of them depended on the rain for whatever activities they were doing around their homes, coupled with the fact that these communities don't have water. They have very minute rivers that are drying up, their streams are drying up, and their water is not as good as it should. They're using dirty water to be able to do activities around them. For communities that were sea-bound communities, sometimes countries from towns in Nigeria transport oil on the sea to Cameroon, and this oil, that we experience oil spillage in water, on the water, which destroys our marine lives, forces the growth of algae and other things around the waters. And why are communities forced to do this? Because it's a means of livelihood for them to be able to transport oil from Nigeria at a lower cost and sell in Cameroon. And because we have polluted policies, polluted implementers and implementers, this work continues. It continues because people are paid off so that the activities can go on. When our systems continue to open up to activities or wrong things that are affecting us, it's a show that we are more concerned for power, for profit, than for people. In the documentary Shifting Power, you will see a lot about the conversations and the damages that this crude oil is causing our forests and our environment. In the future, we anticipate our forests completely being destroyed because of degraded soils from these pollutions. Presently, we are already experiencing the effects. Communities can no longer have good crop yield because their soils have been degraded, their water has been destroyed. Some of them have been displaced, which has changed their livelihood and has changed their way of living. And our governments don't even make money from the big oils who are exporting all the oil in our countries, who are causing the pollution. So if our governments are not even making money from the big oils because our communities are even more degraded, deteriorated than they were before the exploitation, why do we insist